Ark Survival Evolved is amongst the most popular and renowned titles in the entire genre, with over 20 million sales across all platforms and almost $1 billion in revenue. Since the very day of its announcement back in 2015, 8 years ago, that Ark has established itself as one of the most successful survival games of the decade, and it shouldn't be surprising. An immersive world where players can fight with or against one another riding the backs of majestic and monstrous extinct animals is something that many people were waiting for. Even to this day, almost 10 years later, Wildcard still releases new content, going as far as directly collaborating with the community to craft said content, a connection that many developers should have with their player base. But that isn't to say that Ark is perfect. Far from it. The game has a massive list of issues, both big and small, and the video would most likely be a couple of hours long if I would mention all of them. But today, that won't be the case. Today, I want to address only one. A very particular one that I very rarely seen being mentioned anywhere really. Ark 2 is planned to be released sometime in 2025, and that gives the developers plenty of time to plan and solve the numerous issues their original game has, and I'm hoping that this one in particular might be put on the list. Dinosaurs. Like it or not, the prehistoric animals and the ways players can interact with them is probably Ark's biggest selling point. There's a huge selection of creatures to choose from, each one having a distinct look and, most importantly, unique functionalities. All of them have a niche, a purpose. They are tools for survivors to utilize for their own benefit. We use them for travel, resource gathering, resource production, food, weapons of war. From their taming method to breeding, each mechanic related to the numerous creatures of Ark has depth and is extremely dynamic. Even the fauna variety is immense. We have prehistoric mammals, dinosaurs, prehistoric insects, flying reptiles, mythological creatures, aliens, monsters, robots, and on top of that, the surprisingly talented modding community expands the roster even further with beautiful and well-crafted animals. However, there's a huge problem hiding in plain sight. Over the years, the game released many expansions and DLCs, adding a total of 165 unique animals excluding bosses. 165. That's a lot, isn't it? Sounds like a lot of content to me. It should be a good thing, right? Well, in theory, yes. But if you are an avid viewer of Ark content, either on YouTube or Twitch, you might have noticed that everyone, especially in PvP, uses the same dinos over and over and over again. Why is that? Well, unfortunately the answer is very simple. Most of the roster is garbage. But let me explain. I don't mean that most animals are too weak or don't function properly. Of course that is the case for some, but not the majority. In Ark specifically, some animals in fact do need to be weak for the game to function as intended. Example, players take very important primary resources such as food, hide and keratin from early game dinos like dodos, carbonemies, Lastosaurus and mochops for instance. These mobs are weak and slow most of the time, making them easy prey for fresh players, giving them the chance to start out their progress throughout the game. If these creatures were a lot tougher and stronger, it would be immensely more difficult for survivors to begin their journey. Their pacing would be stalled by a large amount, more so for solo players or small tribes, which is a huge portion of Ark's fanbase to begin with. That is not a problem here. The real issue is the absolutely insane power creep present in the later dino editions. Let's do an experiment together. Try to collect your memories about Ark PvP, either watching videos on YouTube or actually playing the game yourself, doesn't matter. Think about all those memories. What dinos do you remember seeing most often? And I mean being used en masse. You probably thought Rexes, Gigas, Paracers, Wyverns, Tapjoras, Pterodons, Shadowmanes, the jet squirrel thing. There are some more, I'm sure, but these are most likely the first ones that came off the top of your head. That's 8 in total. Let's be generous and run it up to 20 just in case. 20 out of 165. That's 88% of the entire roster being overshadowed by the top 12%. That is a massive discrepancy. Although it is expected some species to be preferable more than most in specific situations, when it comes to combat, which is a major pillar of Ark's experience, that number shouldn't be as small as it is. The game has a very large and diverse catalog of animals, some built for speed, others for defense, offense, bleed specialists, poison specialists, some can climb walls, others can glide, some can jump really far, others can burrow, and the list goes on. Regardless if it is PvE or PvP, the game's roster has a multitude of niches and playstyles that should diversify gameplay when it comes to combat. But that doesn't happen. Why? The root of this problem is the very poor implementation of new species into the game by Wildcard. It is extremely common for new dinosaurs to surpass and replace many other themes from the game, and it's not even close. Let's use 2 specific dinosaurs to understand how bad this really is. Utahraptor and Deinonychus. The former is part of the oldest members of the roster, being in the game since its early access launch in 2015, while the latter was released in 2019 with the launch of Wildcard map DLC. At level 1, both species have the exact same base stats and the exact same level up multipliers, meaning that based on their core stats alone, they are basically indistinguishable. What makes them apart, however, is their unique mechanics. Raptor has a basic attack, a pounce that pins smaller creatures and humans, as well as a roar that boosts all raptors in a pack to deal 50% extra damage and reduce damage taken for 45 seconds. Deinonychus has the exact same moves, but their basic attacks deal more damage, all their attacks can cause bleed, which deals a percentage of the target's health per second for 7 seconds and can be stacked 5 times, which also applies to bosses by the way. Their pounce can latch into any animal, not just small, they are faster than raptors, they can climb walls, they can jump surprisingly high, and they can buff themselves with the same roar ability as raptors. Deinonychus completely outcompetes what should be a similar build dino with a different niche. And that is not even the case. Both animals are made for the same purpose, a small and agile pack hunting carnivore, but with the former having so many more bells and whistles, it not only makes Deinonychus vastly superior to Utahraptors, its versatility and damage output makes them superior to many other options the players have access to, being superior in niches that are not even theirs. And by the way, this is not solely about combat. This problem has affected all areas of the game. Gas bags made all cargo-focused themes completely useless apart from Argentavis maybe, since not only it can carry amounts of weight far superior to any other creature on this field, it can also fly and it's extremely tanky once inflated. No other mule-like animal can ever perform as well as that. Gas bags totally blow them out of the water. You can argue that many animals are tied to specific maps, so they are balanced specifically for that map, and while that is a good point and it's technically also true, we cannot forget that players can travel between maps freely at any time and transfer all kinds of resources, including dinos, completely nullifying all kinds of balance made in isolation. Not to mention that even in private PvE servers, you can add mods that spawn all species the owner wants, so the developers should have considered balancing them around the full roster more so than the map they come with. This situation is far more serious than most other games, for the simple fact that we are not only talking about X dino stats being superior to Y dino stats, it's X dino stats being superior to Y dino stats while also having more mechanics, more abilities, being able to do the same or even more tasks easier, better, or faster. You can see this issue absolutely everywhere you look on the roster. But the most outrageous and crystal clear example of the absurd power creep on Ark we can find are Shadow Mains. This animal is completely bonkers. They don't need saddles to be rideable, but still have natural armor as if they were wearing one. Their stats are fairly high. They can teleport into targets and even chain that attack into multiple mobs. They jump extremely high and far. They can go invisible. They get the pack buff. They have a roar that buffs everyone, not just Shadow Mains, giving extra stamina and rapidity recovery as well as a speed boost. They have a damage meter that once filled increases the damage of the next attack by 400%, and if the attack kills the opponent, that bar instantly fills up, allowing you to use it again. They are extremely fast swimmers, and while they are underwater, they get the Spinos Hydrated buff, increasing their movement speed, health regeneration, and damage. And if they get attacked, they automatically inflict their Thornmail Poison passive, which damages the victim over time and decreases the damage dealt by their attacks by 15% per stack, capping out at around 50% damage reduction at 5 stacks, which can also be applied on bosses. The description of this animal's kit is like checking a Wikipedia page. Shadow Mains alone have more mechanics and abilities than half the initial roster during early access. What do Rexes do? They bite and deal damage, and they have a roar that does nothing most of the time. To be fair, this is a very extreme example. Even the other overused themes are no way nearly as OP as this cat, but this only demonstrates how insane Ark's creatures have become throughout the years. And even worse is that the devs don't seem to really care about it. The new additions for the most part replace older species niches, while they could have simply made them specialize on a completely different field. Even the majority of Dino's TLCs don't do much to fix the problem. Wildcard could easily take the opportunity to flesh old dinosaurs out and give them more and more efficient tools so they can compete with the new standards. But that is rarely the case, if ever. Remember the Raptor vs Nonicus example I gave earlier? Raptor actually received the TLC. Before that, it didn't even have the pack buff and the pounce attack. And still, even after reworking it, Deinonychus, Wolves, Ravagers, Allos are still superior to them. There's literally no point in choosing raptors over every species I just listed. This is obviously an issue since it artificially reduces the available roster. It limits it entirely. The game offers a false sense of variety when there really isn't much of it. The vast majority of animals either don't do their jobs no way nearly as good as the top dogs, or their niche is not necessarily or straight up useless, not to mention that it's a complete waste of resources and time crafting these amazing animals just for them to be replaced a year or two later. Alright, we know the problem, we know what causes it, and the effect it has in the game. How could Wildcard fix it? With the sequel already announced, but still a long way to go, this is the perfect moment for us to discuss how can we solve this particular situation. As an open world survival game, Ark has the potential to open doors to many and diverse playstyles, something that sadly doesn't happen in the first title. Many species have overlapping niches, or their purpose can easily be replaced by something as simple as an item. So the main priority while creating their roster for Ark 2 should be establishing more defined and actually useful niches for dinosaurs to fill, regardless if it is combat, crafting, building, gathering, or alike. With a much more primitive setting, this is a great opportunity to highlight dinosaurs as living tools by relying more on them to do mundane tasks. While that already happens in the original game to an extent, especially when it comes to resource gathering, they could expand that even further, having dinosaurs help players build structures, being specialized in refining metals, crafting items, etc. There are many activities that we perform on a daily basis that could be improved by using dinos, and by doing so, it would give them purpose, making them way harder to be replaced in the future. Another thing that could help this matter is, ironically, limitation. more specifically mechanical limitation. In Arc 1, there's zero consistency or even limits regarding the animal's abilities and perks. It can go from not having any skills at all to have a description that feels an entire romantic novel. This ridiculous discrepancy has to go. Limiting each animal to possess between 1 to 2 traits/skills, for example, would give every species a unique flavor to them, while also preventing one or a small group of dinos to outcompete the majority. Of course, that is still going to happen, but by restricting their kit, it would be much easier for devs to craft a well-designed tame without risking overtuning it. These two changes would, in my opinion at least, greatly improve the roster from a viability standpoint. Of course, everyone can tame and use whatever creature they want, and people shouldn't be judged by their taming choices, but the game shouldn't also punish the player for choosing a specific tame. Choices should be exactly that, choices. And at the moment, a massive portion of Arc 1's list of creatures either have unnecessary kits that no one needs, or they are outperformed by another member of the roster. Fixing that in the first game is something that I honestly have zero expectations from happening, especially since we got Karka a few months ago. But there's still hope that they can do so in the sequel. It is only a matter of time until we see if that's the case. Thank you for watching. If you are new to the channel and enjoy these kinds of thoughtful discussions and enjoy dinosaur games, feel free to check the rest of my content. A huge thank you to my Patreon supporters for supporting the channel and the content I create. If you wanna join the ranks, the link will be in the description. Don't forget to leave your thoughts and opinions down below, join our Discord server for memes and pillar nut stuff, and I hope to see you all next week.